And we're live. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Welcome to Azure Functions Community Standup. I hope I'm audible. And we're live. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. Welcome to Azure Functions Community Standup. This is our first live stream of 2024. We have a lot of exciting updates we want to share with you. We also have Eamon and Lily with us who are joining today to talk about some really exciting Azure Functions releases or upcoming releases and share some exciting demo with all of you. So I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Madhura Bharadwaj. I'm a product manager on the Azure Functions team. And I also have Eamon and Lily with me, who are also product managers on the Azure Functions team as well. Uh, so yeah, let's dive straight into it. Let's look at the latest updates we have. Awesome. So the last community live stream we did was in October 2023. So naturally, since then we've released a lot of new features, and let's briefly talk about it. In the languages area, we went GA for support for local development on Apple Silicon Macs. And I'm sure this is really exciting for all you Mac users. You can now go and explore the world of Azure Functions seamlessly, irrespective of whichever language stack you're developing on. Next, we also have general availability for Service Bus message settlement and isolated worker model for .NET. Continuing on the releases for .NET, we also have performance optimizations for the isolated worker model in .NET, and support for .NET Core worker model. So a lot of really good .NET updates for you guys. We also recently released preview for support for Java 21. Right now, it is Linux only, but the Windows support is coming soon. Stay tuned for that. In the durable functions area, which Lily is also going to talk about one of the exciting durable functions features today, we recently went GA on stateful entities and durable functions on the isolated worker model for .NET. We also went GA for suspend and resume orchestrations. This has been one of the asks for quite some time now, so it's really exciting that we have it out already. We also have preview for distributed tracing v2 for durable functions, and Lily will be talking about that today. And we also have preview for a new major version of the durable functions extension. If you like more information on any of these releases, you can go to aka.ms Azure Functions News for more information. With that, I'll hand over to Eamon to talk about building intelligent apps with Azure Functions using OpenAI. Over to you, Eamon.
Hey, awesome, Madhura. Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to talk a little bit about one thing that's on everybody's mind at the moment is how do we start taking advantage of OpenAI and all the advancements that have been happening there. And one way to think about it is how do you build that intelligence into your apps that you're building new apps or your existing apps and try to take advantage of all of the OpenAI work that's been happening over the last year. And so one of the things we're looking at in the function is how to make it easier for you to build these applications and not have to kind of learn everything about OpenAI. You don't have to be a machine learning expert. How do you, as an app developer, start to introduce this intelligence into your applications and start to see kind of all that productivity we're seeing across the industry? And there's kind of four main scenarios that we think about when we're building these intelligent apps with functions. And the first one is kind of where a lot of people start, and actually is one of the more powerful ones, is how do you take advantage of text and content completion? And so this is very typical of the scenario. You might be reading an email, you might be on a web page, and you want to either maybe summarize the page, you want to generate new content based on the existing content you have. So all of those scenarios you see today about really enriching that experience for your end users through text and content completion. The second scenario that a lot of customers start with is trying to take advantage of chatbots and AI-powered assistants. And so when you think about ChatGPT, it's really about how do you give that immersive experience for your customers so that the work they're doing as they're interacting with you as a company, as a business, how do you enhance your chatbot experience so that they can get all the relevant capabilities they might need from their interaction, but also take advantage of that OpenAI experience powered by ChatGPT. And then the third scenario, we see a lot of our customers, especially organizations, there's so much data customers have already. And that data, you really want to be able to perform intelligent search on top of it. And so you think about semantic search on your own content, what does that look like? And there's a whole set of kind of scenarios around bring your own data with RAG. And so that's one of the things that we've been looking at. How do we make it easier for customers to actually bring their own data, but also take advantage of the power of OpenAI? And then the last scenario that we're starting to see customers think about is how do you augment that OpenAI experience with your own intelligence you have inside of your own organization? And so, there's simple things when you ask, ChatGPT or OpenAI how to perform a task, and maybe it doesn't have the relevant information. Maybe it doesn't know how to look up your support ticket and get that information out because it doesn't have access to it. So you want to be able to extend that capability of ChatGPT and OpenAI by bringing your own functions and capabilities. And so if it doesn't know the answer, it can actually call back into you to get that answer. Then you can go look up that information you might have in real time, hand that back to ChatGPT, and then it will send it back to the user. So another kind of core scenario customers are looking at that really tries to expand the capabilities of the model by bringing your own intelligence and capabilities to it. So you think about all those kind of four scenarios about really trying to build intelligence into your applications. What does functions offer when you're trying to take advantage of those four scenarios and using OpenAI? And so some of the core things that we offer inside of functions, which probably most of you know, is because we're serverless, we allow you to basically write the code, and then depending on the demand of your agenda, it will scale from 0 if it's not being used all the way up to hundreds of instances. And so what this allows you to do is to have confidence that if your intelligent app becomes very popular, if it has high demand during certain peak times of the day, that serverless capabilities we have in functions will expand automatically for you and meet those requirements of building really high-end intelligent apps with OpenAI. The other thing that Functions has, and it's been used by most of you guys today, is how do you actually bring in customer data, process it often in real time, and then be able to store it into backend. And one of the capabilities we have inside of Functions is what we call extensions. And what these extensions allow you to do is to build triggers and bindings. And so we offer a whole set of these that allows you to interact with all of the different data sources you might have in your organization, be able to bring in that data as it appears through our trigger capability, and then process it through our input and output bindings. And the nice thing about that is a lot of the plumbing that you have to do in order to connect to those systems is managed by the Azure Functions extension model. And you're really just focusing on what is the business I need on this data to be able to process it, to enhance it, and then eventually store it into some backend system where you might have other clients access that. The third thing you'll notice with Azure Functions is a lot of our customers build APIs. And the nice thing about building APIs with Functions is you get the serverless capability, so it scales on demand. But we also have some really nice integration with Azure APIM. And so what this gives you is that full rich APIM capabilities on top of your compute API. So you can then offer that out inside your organizations for other apps to use, or outside to external customers who want to interact directly with your APIs built on top of Functions. The other thing that becomes important when you're building a lot of these intelligent apps is you'll start to see there's often kind of a workflow and state management that's required when you're building these apps, because there's often multi-step capabilities you need to do, as well as the ability to store state and retry that in case of failure along the way. And as a lot of you might be aware of, and Lily will go into more of our durable functions capabilities as some new things came out recently, but with durable, it really gives you that power to not only perform complex workflow with the confidence that it will retry based on error, but allows you to maintain state throughout these different calls. And so some of the challenges you typically have with serverless is because it's serverless and distributed and it's async, oftentimes it's difficult to maintain the state and the workflow you want to. But durable functions capabilities in Azure Functions really gives you that rich experience to create workflow. And then the last thing that's kind of important with Functions is because we're open source, and so everything that all these extensions, the runtime, everything is open source, it does allow you to host it in multiple different environments that you might need for your own workloads. And so oftentimes you might want to host it directly in serverless where we do the scale. But if you have applications that have web applications, you could host it inside of app services environments. And so if you have a front-end web app, but you want to process some data using the back-end capabilities of an API and Functions, you can host all of those together and allow for simple management and scaling. But it's not just app services. You might be using container apps where you've decided to go down the container route path. You can now use Functions inside of container apps as well. So it really depends on what kind of workload you're trying to build, and then be able to bring that Functions experience into that environment to give you all these rich capabilities I talked about. Okay, so given those 4 top-level scenarios we talked about, one of the things we've been looking at is how could we even enhance Azure Functions capabilities to make it a lot easier for you as a developer inside of your organization to build these intelligent apps. And so what we've been working on, and there's an early preview I'm going to talk about today, which is the capability to perform those types of scenarios I talked about by using the Azure Functions programming model. And we built a new extension that's available up on GitHub right now. It's very early preview, so we just launched it last week. And what it does is it starts to give you some of those capabilities you would expect if you were working with Functions against existing things like event hubs or service bus or queues. But now it makes it a lot easier for you to work with OpenAI using those same type of capabilities you expect with our Functions programming model. And so I'm going to talk about a little of those scenarios we've opened up today with the extension, as well as some new ones we're working on, but would love to get more feedback. Would love to have you try this out and tell us what you're trying to build when you're trying to build these intelligent apps, but also what would you like to see inside of our extensions to make that a lot easier for you as an application developer. So there's kind of 4 main capabilities that we're offering. And I'm going to talk a little bit about these and then hopefully jump into a demo and kind of show you live what they look like, how you could build them yourselves, how you could go to the GitHub repo and start to build out these kind of intelligent apps, integrate them into your new apps, your existing apps, how to bring that intelligence directly into the type of applications you're trying to build. So the first one, if you remember, was this kind of content completion, text completion. And in some ways, it's the easiest one because it really is just like a pass-through of that system prompt, directly passing that into the OpenAI endpoint for ChatGPT, so you can get that rich content creation, summarization, all of those capabilities that it offers. And so what we've done with the functions extension is we've basically allowed you to leverage the programming model, so you don't have to think about how do I store my secrets, how do I pass all that information in. It all kind of fits nicely into the programming model that we have in functions and allows you to perform this kind of search without having to write any of the direct code you might have to normally if you're going against OpenAI or Azure OpenAI. And then the second scenario I talked about is how do you perform these chat completions? And so one of the things that we've been looking at with the chat completion binding is make it easier for you to offer out chat experiences to your end user, but maintain that history and context along the way. And so oftentimes, as you know, when you do chat, the previous submissions you've had in your chat actually want to be sent into OpenAI, so you can use that as relevancy and context when it answers other questions. And so we've automatically built in that capability into the extension, so you don't have to manage any of that history. But the benefit is because we store it automatically for you as well, you will have that chat history available inside your own systems so that you can then leverage that if somebody connected in later, you want to bring that context back to see what that chat experience was. All of that history is not available to you as a developer or for application development, but also for historical context if you need to store it. And then the third kind of scenario we really see a lot of our customers doing is how do you bring your own data in? And so that retrieval augmented generation is really about, I have a lot of content in my organization. I want to take advantage of semantic search on top of that and the power of OpenAI to give comprehension on top of that relevancy. And so what we've done inside of our extension is really try to simplify the experience of you bringing in content and then actually storing that into a semantic vector database so that you can perform search on it. And so when you think about the complexities of that today, if you were to try to build it yourself, there's a lot you have to learn about what are the vector databases, what is a vector database, how do I actually parse up my data correctly, how do I store it correctly, how do I search it? So all of those capabilities we've abstracted away for you, but still give you the power through configuration of the extension to bring in all of that data. And of course, because we have all of these existing triggers and input bindings into existing data sources you might have in your organization, like SQL or Cosmos, or you have live data coming through event hubs, all of that real-time data as it comes in can now be automatically integrated into your vector database search so that you can perform semantic search on top of it and then leverage Azure OpenAI with that context to give you rich experiences and content back to your end users. And so you'll see a little bit of what that extension does, but the whole goal again is you don't have to think about every possible capability that I need to understand what vector databases. Really focus on my content in and then exposing that into my application so that relevancy and unique content is available. And then obviously after you've imported it in, you want to be able to chat with that data. And so we've kind of enhanced that chat capability so that you can bring in all of that context, be able to perform search on it, pass it on to Azure OpenAI automatically, and be able to retrieve that information out. And so again, when you think about, there's a lot that goes on. If you've ever seen any of the samples, there's a lot of code out there that does a lot of plumbing work, I would say, for you. But there's also a lot of complexity and maintenance you have to do. And so what we've done with the extension is we've put that all into the extension for you. So you're really just focusing on business logic, like you're kind of used to when you build Azure Functions. And then the last capability that we're starting to look at, it isn't available just yet, but hopefully it will be soon, is the ability to enhance, like I talked about earlier, your intelligent app with your own capabilities you have inside of your own organization. And typically how this is done is you kind of register your endpoint as basically an action or a function into OpenAI. And what that tells OpenAI is if it doesn't have the answer, it can actually go and say, use this API that you've registered to go get that answer in real time and then hand it back into OpenAI. And then it will use that context as well as other information passed to the user to give that rich experience that might be available. And so you can think about real-time data that OpenAI might have. It might be access to your own content in your organization that it doesn't have. But all of that capability can be exposed by registering your capabilities into Azure OpenAI. And those capabilities are backed by an Azure function. And so that's what we're also looking at as we build this out. Okay, so with that, hopefully you kind of get an idea of those four kind of, I would say, pillar scenarios. Obviously, there's tons of different things you can do with each one of those. But I'm going to give a little demo on how it works. If you want to get started with the extension today, what can you do? And hopefully just give you a quick walkthrough of the capability. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to share my Visual Studio and see if I can get that back. Okay, 1 second here. Let me just share my whole screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. And what I mean is I'm inside of Visual Studio. And so I'm using C#, but as you know, with Azure Functions, we support all the different programming languages that you might be familiar with. So you might be using .NET, like I'm showing here. You might be using Python, Java, Node, PowerShell, all of those kind of capabilities you expect in different languages. Because they're embedded into our extensions, you can use these capabilities in whatever language you want to. So that's one of the nice things about using functions is you don't have to learn a new language to be able to take advantage of API. Or OpenAI, you can just use it yourself. So let's go through a couple of these scenarios. So the first one is that search text, basically this content creation. And so you'll see here, this basically just takes a HTTP request, and then we have this text completion binding available here that will automatically configure and talk to that OpenAI endpoint. So here's your deployment name and be able to perform responses. So let's open up this and see what it looks like. Okay, so I'll just do a simple request. So you can see, just with that few lines of code that I had in that search text, I'm able to pass in any kind of question I want through my HTTP response, and I didn't have to write any code in order to get a response. You can see all I had to do was just pass in the request, and it was automatically responds back for you. So that's kind of the most simple scenario, but it's also one of the more powerful ones, as you know, when you're integrating with ChatGPT and OpenAI. So the second scenario I'll jump on real quick is the chat scenario. So oftentimes you want to be able to perform chat with all of that history and do everything else associated with it. So you can, again, see we have a chatbot extension that we basically kind of abstracts away everything for you. So you're just left with a little bit of code here to be able to start a new chat session and then be able to interact with it, have all that history available to you. Okay, so let me go in and take a little bit of this chat. So the first thing when you create a chat, what we've done is allow you to give it the context of how you want the chat to perform. So you can see here, I just said, you are a helpful chatbot, and all your English responses mention the weather. So I'm going to create a new chat. So now I have a chat ID, and I've told it how to perform when I do questions on it. So now that you have a chat ID, you might want to be able to ask questions of it. So I'll just say, where is Seattle? So now I've started the chat, and I want to be able to get the response back from that chat. So here you can see I'm just going to call the same one with the same ID and give it the timestamp I want to work in. That gives you the flexibility to kind of go back in time, have full access to all of the history. And hopefully you can see here that it says Seattle is located in the Pacific Northwest and is known for its rainy, cloudy weather throughout the year. So you can see it's brought in that instructions we've told it on how to respond. But one thing about chat, that's very similar to text. If you think about it, we've just made a search. But with chat, you want that history to also be there. So if you think about it, I can say, what can I do there? And so I haven't mentioned Seattle in this interaction at all, but because we're doing a chat experience, you can basically go and say, it'll keep all of that history. So it knows I'm talking about Seattle because we've taken the chat history automatically for you, and we've pasted that back into the response when we do another search. So you can see it knew that I was asking about Seattle, and it gives information about Seattle, and it also says, make sure you check the weather, because that was the instructions we gave for the chat. So there you can see a lot of the experiences you want to build with chat, you can do with just a few lines of code by creating a chat, and then you can basically give it the question you want in the chat. So you can see there's only about 3 lines of code here. All of that, everything else is done through the extension. And you can get the response back automatically, and you can filter to the timestamp. And there's a lot more parameters and capabilities available. But you can see within like 3 lines of code, I have basically everything coming back to me. So you just imagine you can build a pretty rich chat experience with all of that history with just a few lines of code inside of functions using this extension. Okay, and so the last one I'm going to touch on real quick is the company data scenario. So this is where you're bringing your own data into the OpenAI and vector database capabilities. And how we've done this is we basically allowed you to create embeddings automatically for this data. And then it'll store it into a vector database. And this one, we've used Azure Data Explorer as the endpoint, but we are working on other vector databases as well that you could, like, AI Search, Cosmos, other ones you might want to store your data in to be able to perform these queries on top of it. And so what's happening here is everything, again, is being taken by this extension right here. So all I'm doing in the code is I'm saying, okay, get me the data. At this point, I'm just getting it from files, but I could be getting it from queues, Event Hub, SQL, wherever your data is, either coming in new or existing data. And I'm just going to actually embed it with a title and the embeddings, and then store it inside of that vector database for you. So let's do that search. Import and come down here. So this is just a very simple, all I'm doing here is, you look at my data, I have a couple of documents that they're basically the documents from our documentation for Azure Functions. I just exported a couple, but now I'm going to import those into this vector database using our extension with a couple of lines of code. And so what this is doing now is it's parsing all of that content, and it's creating embeddings and storing it into Azure Data Explorer. So you can see it brought in the 2 files, it chunked them up automatically for me, and now they're available to perform vector search on top of. So again, this was all done with basically 2 or 3 lines of code, and then everything else is done through configuration of the extension using our typical input and output bindings, if you're familiar with them. So you can see everything is just being automatically brought in here. Okay, so let me do a quick search on that data since we just brought it in. So here's the search data. And again, you don't have to do anything because we already know how to interact with Azure Data Explorer. You just tell what prompt you want to use, and the embeddings model, the chat model, everything is configurable. And then we will return that result directly back. But again, this is searching your data now, and then it's passing it over to OpenAI, to Azure ChatGPT using the data retrieved from your own internal systems. Okay, so let's go and run the last one here. So I'll just ask a question like, what are the different hosting options available in Azure Functions? So this is going up against that vector database, that Azure Data Explorer, that's your data. It's not available in Azure OpenAI, AI, but you can see it brought in all of the different information related to the hosting experience. And it gave you a reference to where that information was. So because it was in that file, Azure Hosting Options.txt, it will actually bring back that reference so you can give that back to your end users of what content you used in order to get the response. And then the last thing I'll do is I'll just specify, because I'm searching my own data, where is Seattle? And you can see here it says, I'm sorry, I can only answer questions about Azure Functions. Because even though we're calling ChatGPT, but because I didn't provide any context, since I didn't find anything about Seattle in the documents I have, then it says, oh, I can only answer questions about the context and content that was provided to me and not about other things. So you have a lot of control over how you want that experience to work, leveraging OpenAI with your own data. Okay, so that's kind of the main scenarios I wanted to talk about today. All of these are up. Let me share back the screen again. And they are available for you to use today. So everything I showed there is available up on the repo. And I would definitely encourage you guys to please try it out. Please give us some feedback and let us know how it's going. And there is a link I sent. I can add it to the chat as well, where you can get started and try all this. I'd love to you guys try different languages, different capabilities, different scenarios. Let us know really what you would like to see inside this extension with Azure Functions to make it a lot easier to build that interaction and kind of get started very quickly building this intelligence into your own apps. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to hand over to Lily, who's going to talk about all the durable stuff that we've done recently, mostly focused on the distributed tracing capabilities we just released. So Lily, over to you.
Yep, thanks, Eamon. So let me add this back. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So on the durable function side, we recently released distributed tracing v2 that's currently in public preview. So compared to v1, which was an experimental feature that supported only .NET and also only the Azure storage provider, v2 supports all the language SDKs that are supported by durable functions and all of the storage providers as well. It also contains more detailed spans, which we'll look at later in the demo. And just some notes before we move on. So for right now, this feature supports application insights only as the monitoring tool, and there are no traces instrumented for durable entities yet. Next. All right, so it's super easy to configure this new feature. So first, you need to get the package that has the feature in it. So for .NET Isolated, it's a different package than .NET in process. So please remember to get the correct one. And then if you're a non-.NET user, you would have to use the latest version of the extension bundles, which is version 4, and that's configurable in the host.json file. And once you kind of get your package, step 2 is to enable this feature in the host.json as well. And then step 3 is probably optional for most of the users out there, since Azure, when you create an Azure Function app, we create an applications insights for you automatically. And so you likely won't have to do the last step, but if for whatever reason you don't have an app insights resource configured for your app, you would have to do that. Another note that I'd like to mention is this feature, distributed tracing v2, is compatible with the durable task framework, which is the underlying C# open source framework that's powering durable functions. And if you are using that, you need a different package, which is the durable task core package to use this feature. And with that said, I'm gonna go on to a demo. So hopefully you can kind of see my screen here. So this app is actually an app that I demoed in a previous community stand-up when we released the new programming model for Node. And I basically just configured it to use this new distributed tracing feature. And it's super easy, like I mentioned. Because I'm using Node, I have to specify version 4 of the extension bundle. And then I just add this tracing property here to enable this feature. For some reason, VS Code is showing these squiggly lines, but this should work. And that's all you need to do. There's no code changes needed. Nothing else is necessary to kind of enable this feature. And so before we go look at the traces, I'll just quickly go through kind of what this app does. So in a nutshell, what it does is it backs up files in a specified directory into blob storage. And so what I have here is I have this demo file folder that has a subdirectory that has a text file in it, and then also another text file. And what I've done is I've sent a post request to start this orchestration that to upload these files into blob storage. And because the traces could take up to several minutes, excuse me, up to several minutes to show up in App Insights, I've already done this before before the call here. So I'll show you how the traces looks like. Let me share. All right. So here I'm on my applications insights resource that is configured with my functions app. And to kind of get this view, you have to go to your transaction search here on the left menu. And then you want to make sure to select the dependency and the request events, because these are associated with kind of the prefixes of durable functions. So then you get the traces that you want. So I'm just going to take a look at the first one. So let me collapse some tabs first. So as you can see, I have this orchestration that basically looks through all of the files in that folder, in the files folder. And that's one of the activities. And then because I have two kind of different files in that folder, there are two activities here to upload those files into blob storage. So you can see that you can see all of the activities that are started by this orchestration and the duration of each, and you can drill into each one to see more details. So this one is not as interesting, but you can still see kind of some details that you might find useful. But let's look into the blob one. That's the activity for copying files into blob storage. This one is more interesting because it calls into an external dependency to kind of store our files. And so and you can see kind of everything that happened in this activity to upload the file into blob storage. And if I click into one of those, you can see that here in this activity, we backed up this file called test.txt into this container called backups in blob storage. And the whole process took approximately 200 milliseconds. So this way you can get a clear view of the requests as they go from kind of different services, which is what durable functions is useful for, right? A lot of times it's coordinating the operations of different services. And so being able to trace kind of a request from end to end is very helpful when debugging. And so that's why we released this new feature. And hopefully you find it useful. It's still in preview, and we're looking for feedback as we iterate towards GA. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I think there's one more slide where we have some references. So we wrote a blog post about this feature, and you can check it out at aka.ms/durablefunc-ttv2. We have a lot of the information that I mentioned today and a lot more, and also a link to our official docs on Microsoft Learned, so you can check that out. And if you have questions, feel free to leave them as issues in our repos. For durable functions related ones, you want to go to the Azure Functions Durable Extension repo. And for the Durable Task Framework one, you want to go to the Durable Task repo. And I think that's it for me. I'll hand it back to you, Madhura.
Thanks, Lily. That was a great set of demos from both Eamon and Lily. Thank you so much for that. As always, like I mentioned in the beginning, if you have more questions or would like more information on anything that was discussed today, you can head on over to aka.ms/azurefunctionsnews. I'd like to also take this opportunity to remind you of some of the upcoming retirements for Azure Functions features. The retirements that I want to call out are on the screen. You should be able to see them, hopefully. In the languages area, we have Node 14 and 16 that will go out of support on the Functions platform on the 30th of June 2024. Before that date, be sure to upgrade to either Node 18 or Node.js 20. Node.js 20 will be going GA pretty soon, so watch out for that. We also have Python 3.8, which is going out of support on the 14th of October this year. Be sure to upgrade to Python 3.9. From the extensions world, we have Azure Functions Cosmos DB extension, a V3 version that will retire end of August, and Azure Functions Service Bus extension V4 that will retire end of March next year. For all of these, if you'd like to look at migration guides or upgrade guides, what you need to do to keep your continued support for your apps, you can go to Azure Functions News, the link that you can see on the screen, and I have linked all the upgrade migration guides on that blog for you. So hopefully you can check that out. And all the information that Eamon and Lily have shared today, the GitHub repos, I will link them in that blog as well, so you can make use of that and talk to us and share your feedback. I know that we had a question on the chat that Eamon was going to talk about. So Eamon, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, I can take it. Thanks, Madhura. There was a question around building web APIs or APIs in functions or in app services, and which one is easier to use? How do you kind of make it easier to get up and running? And I think a lot of it, both of them are very good, as you can probably imagine, at building APIs and hosting them, because not only do they have the frameworks automatically installed for you, they also have the ability to integrate with Azure APIM if you want to expose them out as API. So either choice is great. I think the one thing I would look at is, do you plan on your API in a serverless way, and where it may not get traffic that often, and it may need to scale automatically beyond what app services has? Then I think functions is a great way, because you can get your API out there and it'll automatically scale down to nothing when you're not using it, or up as much as possible when you need to. But app services has a lot of capabilities built in itself. So if you have more of a persistent API and you want to take advantage of some of the capabilities it has, then obviously app services is a great platform to host it as well. So I'm not sure I would say one way or the other that one is better. It's more about, do you expect it to be serverless and kind of scale to zero when you don't need it and then scale back up? Or do you want something that has, we're hosting a lot of different APIs on an app services infrastructure, and you want it to scale, but the chance of it going to zero is probably not very high. Okay, great. Any others, Madhura? Or I think
great. Yeah, there's one more question about durable entities, and I think Lily will be answering that. Over to you, Lily.
Yep. So we do have support for durable entities in .NET 8 right now in the isolated model. Hopefully that answers your question, Jack.
Great. Thank you, Lily. Thanks, everyone. This was a great live stream. Be sure to check out our content on the news on aka.ms/Azure Functions News. And we'll see you in the community stand-up for March. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.